All right, so we are doing our question night. Here we go. Since the disciples were with Jesus in the garden, do we have any idea what their reaction was to their friend Judas' betrayal? How should we react to that? Up until Judas' betrayal, the disciples were absolutely clueless. If you actually read the accounts about the Last Supper, or the last time Jesus had a meal with all of his disciples there, Jesus actually says the person who dips the bread, he says, someone's going to betray me. And the disciples are like, who could it be? And he says, the person who dips the bread in my cup with me, they're the ones that are going to betray me. He dips his bread in the cup, and Judas goes and dips his bread right in. Judas takes it out and then says, I have to go. And the Bible says he was actually, Satan had indwelt him at that moment, and he goes to leave. And all the disciples actually thought, it actually said this, they all thought he was going out to maybe go get some more food because he was the treasurer of the group. He had the money. So the disciples, in some ways, had no idea that Judas was going to betray Jesus. It was so foreign to them. They had spent 3 years together, and Judas had everybody fooled but Jesus. And nobody saw it coming. And when it happened, they all were kind of like, Judas, oh my goodness. And then it kind of happened so fast that the disciples all kind of scattered. So we're not given their specific reaction. How should we react to Judas' betrayal?
Yeah. One in time.
How should we react to Evan liking pickles? I don't know. How should we react to Judas' betrayal? He betrayed the God of the universe. I think we can look at it and see that he gave himself over to evil, and that God had used that even to bring Jesus to the cross, and that was part of his plan. So even when people do evil things, does that catch Jesus by surprise? It catch God by surprise. In fact, that God actually used that in his plan and sovereignly planned that out to where Judas was the one that was going to betray Jesus. And so I think we can look at that, and our hearts should break over it. And I think we can also look at that and say, God was still in it, and God was still using it. So I don't know if I'm answering that fully. If you want to add a follow-up question, we can go there. You should come out on Sunday morning. That answer will come out a little bit more. It should come out on Sunday morning. All right? Let's go to the next one. Will you be my best friend, Abby? Oh. So, sorry, Abby. Abby, would you like to be someone's best friend? It depends. If I'm asking? All right. If anybody else is asking? All right, cool. All right, we said these are anonymous, but I guess you do need to show yourself. Why do friends? Why? Oh, why do friends stab you in the back?
What? Wait, do friends backstab you?
All right, so why do friends stab you in the back? That's what they're going for. That's a good question. There are many reasons why, but ultimately, think about it this way. Are we all broken? So broken people do broken things, don't they?
Yes.
And think about this. When we were, the Bible shares that God created everything perfectly. There was creation. And then what happens after creation? A short time after God creates everything, man sins. And it all becomes broken. And then throughout human history, what do you see people trying to do? They're trying to fix their brokenness. They know something's wrong, and they're trying to make it right. So this is why people they strive for achievement. This is why people go out of their way to try to be compassionate. This is why people will do things that you'll look at and be like, that's crazy. You'll see a parent who will spend so much time at work trying to just gain so much more money because they're trying to not just ignore you as a child, but they're trying to fix something that's broken. Something that's broken within them, something that they're trying to become whole again. And ultimately, we can only find wholeness in Jesus. Bible shares about how we have creation, we have fall, and then we have redemption. Redemption in Jesus, to where God buys us back and He makes us whole. And then at the end of time, we become restored and complete back with God. And so, why do people stab us in the back? There's many reasons. But ultimately, it comes down to they're broken and they're trying to fix themselves in some way. So if I can just build myself up a little bit more, even at your expense, maybe that could help me to feel better. But here's the question. When people do this, will it hurt? And should it hurt? Like, if that's happened to you, should you just kind of bury it and be like, yeah, it should hurt. And you should let it hurt a little bit. Or a lot. You should talk with some people about it. But if you hang on to this, and don't actually move past well, why would that person do something so broken to me? And start to open up. I was actually listening to a book this morning. I listen to a lot of books. But I was listening to a book this morning, and this guy talking about how he was on a New York City subway. On the subway, he gets in, he sits down in the car. They go one stop, and then a father comes in with his two kids. The kids are just running around all over the place. And the father is just kind of sitting there, staring at the ground. They go one stop, two stop, and by this point, the kids are like starting to make people nervous on the train because they're running all over the place. They're starting to bump into people. And the guy said, I stood up and I go over to the father, and in his head, he's just thinking to himself, like, say something, do something. Like, it is your job as a parent to step up and act, whether the kids fully listen to you or not, like, at least acknowledge that they are being crazy to everybody else and focus in on that moment to try to help. He goes over to the father and says, hey, I'm just wondering, could you say anything to your kids? And the father looks up at him and says, I would like to, but I don't know how. An hour ago, their mother just died in the hospital, and I don't have words as to how to tell them, and I don't even know what to say. The guy said, in that moment, I stepped back and realized that the pain that father was causing me was driven by a pain in his life. And when I started to see that pain in his life, it opened me up to where instead of me being angry at him for insulting me or coming after me or infringing on my space, I got to enter his a little bit and see, wow, you're really broken, and actually you're reacting this way to me, and I need to love you and not just be angry at you. Most of the time, people who do this type of stuff, they're hurting. And if we, yes, deal with the anger, understand that it was wrong, but if we then move past it, where we can start to see, well, why would they do something like this? What's the pain and what's the brokenness that's driving this? That's actually where God starts to bring more healing in your life, to where you get to see God's perspective on things. That even the worst of the worst, there's still broken people who are just crying out for help. And what type of God do we have that when people cry out for help, does he just go? Or is he the type of God that shows love and compassion and mercy even to all? Whether they accept it or reject it, he's still gracious for you. So, probably a much longer answer than you're anticipating, but yeah, that is what it's always much longer than you're anticipating. All right, what's the next question? This one's for Shelly. Is it really showing God's love by making me answer questions that I don't know the answer to any longer? That is a great question. Shelly, if you would like to take this one. Wow, Aaron just got called out.
I'm challenging you to step up and put that in So I'm just showing God love because I'm wanting to think about that.
Sure. All right, what's the next one? What are some ways to keep from being bitter when a friend wrongs us? Kind of answered it it already. You have to first forgive for your own sake, for your own soul, for your own heart, so that bitterness doesn't creep in. And so you forgive, not because they asked for it or because they deserve it, but because God has forgiven you so much that you can extend forgiveness to them. That's the beauty of Christianity. It's the beauty of a relationship with God, is that you've actually been forgiven so much more than what you even know or what you deserve, that it should overwhelm you to the point to where you can now start to do something courageous by stepping out and starting to forgive someone else that does not deserve it, because you realize how much forgiveness you've been given. And if you don't forgive, what happens is you start to, bitterness starts to creep in. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago, I think on Sunday morning. And so keeping your eye, actually, it's funny, you can turn this song up.
Turn it up now.
Fix my eyes on you.
Alright, so the way you keep from being bitter is not by trying to focus on stop being bitter. It's fixing your attention on something so much greater. And that greater thing is ultimately Christ and what He's done for you. And the more you become overwhelmed with what He's done for you, the more you realize, I can't be bitter at this person. If there's anybody that should be bitter at somebody, it should be God at me. And yet, since He hasn't done that, I'm just so overwhelmed by His grace to me that I'm starting to be able to see maybe that situation like on the subway there. That where this person is coming from is a deep pain that I can now start to love Him. Alright, what's the next one? I would think that it would be much easier to make friends with such a gleaming ball head as you agree. I don't know. I don't even know how to answer this question. Listen, I'm an introvert by nature. You see me up here talking loud, it's because I get to talk at a bunch of you and you don't have to respond back. So I can talk at you for forever. When I don't know you, sometimes it's actually very hard for me to have conversation and to get to know you, because I'm like, my brain freezes up. I'm like, hi, how are you? You know. So is it that easy for you to be friends with me? I hope you can be friends with me, and I hope that I'm nice to you. Just know it's hard sometimes. So if there's awkward moments, just know I'm awkward. It's okay. I know. See? There you go. Actually, when you get into an awkward moment with me, instead of just being like, well, that was awkward, where you should be like, wow, he really cares about me because he's willing to do something really awkward that's not really good for him. Right, Aaron? Yep. Yeah, there you go. All right. What's the next one? When in a friendship, is it a good time to talk to the person about Jesus? I think if you're a follower of Jesus and you're deeply committed to who Jesus is, it should just start to kind of come out. Now, that doesn't mean like you sit him down and you're like, here, let me tell you about Jesus, all right? And it's like this Bible thumping, like, I'm going to smack you over the head with this. So, you know, it's just, like somebody's like, hey, how's your day? What's going on? If I'm focusing on Jesus and I'm seeing who Jesus is, some of that's just going to come out. They're like, oh, it's good. You know, like, something that God's been showing me has been this. Now, that normally doesn't come up in normal conversation because you're like, like what? But over time, as you get to know somebody, like that stuff should just come out, because if you're spending time with God, it should just come out of you. And it doesn't have to be like any formatted script or anything, but it's a situation where it's like, all right. But one of the things as a church that we talk about is investing in people's lives, caring about them, no strings attached, and then inviting them to their next step in their walk with Jesus. So what that means is we're actually looking and saying, okay, well, what would be the next step for you? In getting to know the God that has shown me so much grace, shown me so much love, I'd just love to share that with you. It's not all right, I'm going to share it with you and I can figure out a way to convert you or whatever. You're going to come over to the dark side or the light side over here, whatever we're calling it. And it shouldn't be anything like that. It should just be like, well, in caring for you, and if we're talking about Jesus and you're like kind of like standoffish about it, should you just be drilling the person with it? Probably not. But you should be looking at it and just saying, okay, well, what's your next step? in the conversation, what is appropriate and what's going to be helpful for you. So it might be inviting just a youth group to hang out. It might be just inviting them over to your house to like hang out and talk. It might be like, hey, what do you think about, like, maybe become a youth group. What do you think about what they talked about? And then no follow-up. You just listen and then that's it. Like, it might be where the person's at. The reality is, talking to a person about Jesus is actually much more about caring for the person, seeing where they're at, and actually loving them, than it is just kind of drilling it down their throat. And then over time, like, if Jesus overwhelms you, it should just come out. All right, next one. Abby, should we be friends with someone who hurt you? All right, Abby, you get to go on this one.
I feel bad about the last question. I didn't just make it. If someone hurt you, should you be friends with them? I don't think it's wrong to set up boundaries. They don't have to be best friends with someone who's hurt you, but I wouldn't treat it badly.
Kindness to all. The level of the depth of the friendship or the relationship depends on the level of trust. Does that make sense? And so you might have somebody, like we call everybody that we kind of know friends. Like even if they're not really friends, they're just acquaintances or like kind of people we know. They're like, oh, I know them, yeah, they're friends. It's like you talk to them like 5 times in your life. You know, they're not really friends, but the more trust you have, the deeper that relationship is. And so somebody who's hurt you, that trust is broken. And so should you be going out of your way to be kind to them? Yes. But the level of friendship and how close you are to them, maybe you don't spend a ton of time with them. Maybe you don't like share a ton of your personal information with them. Thanks, Abby.
Ready?
Yeah. To Ian and other group leaders, are you still friends or in touch with some of your earliest friends when you were in school? I'll let you guys start with this. Do you guys all remember when you went to school? All right, I got one more.
Yeah, no.
Yes.
All right, I have one yes.
Yes.
Like best friends from school, you're still kind of best friends now?
No, but I'm in contact.
All right, in contact. All right. Gaz?
No one from high school, one. There's a couple people in college that I chat with occasionally. We also go there.
My best friend was my best friend in high school, so I'm just going to say that right now. My wife. I'm not really in touch with anybody from high school. I have one friend from college that I talk to almost every week. He's probably my best friend outside of my wife. You're going to find this. Most of your friendships are going to matter, or are going to be formed in proximity, or in the space around you. So as you, like if you are in, we'll just use Gilliland as an example. So you live in Gilliland, and then you go away to college, and you come back to Gilliland, and all your high school friends are there, and you actually still have a lot of stuff in common. You might still be friends with them. But if you move away, or they move away, or the stuff that you have in common is no longer the stuff that you have in common now. Those are the things that kind of tie initial friendships, and so they'll often disappear. That's why I say it's good to make good friends here in high school, but it's more important to learn how to make good friends than it is just to keep the good friends that you have in high school. And the reason why I say that is you're going to go off to college, and most of your high school friends are not going to go to the same college as you. And so if you know how to make good friends, you're going to make good friends there. And honestly, the friends that you're going to make in college are going to be the people that you're going to be living with for 4 years. The way your friends in high school, you're going to see them, a couple times a day, but you're not actually going to be living with them. And that's why a lot of times college relationships will last a little longer. But even then, they kind of drift apart, and now your friendships are kind of proximity. Like, all right, Shelly, Kelly, Kathy. I couldn't get it out right now. Like, they're pretty good friends, but I didn't talk, 6, 7 years ago? Were you guys like really good friends? Well, yeah, you two. And some of that just kind of came from Kathy started working with youth group, and then they started just being closer to each other, and then next thing you know, friendship blossomed. I didn't even know Gaz is a pretty good friend of mine. I didn't even know Gaz before I came here. And I would, all right, Gaz, get ready. I would consider Gaz one of my best friends around here. I know. But the reality is that's the time that we spent next to each other that's kind of forged that. So, all right, next question. Ian, as a fellow introvert, could you give some tips for making friends when you are so introverted? It's not easy. I'm just going to be upfront. Think about this. Your goal is less about making a lot of friends and more about being kind to as many people as you can and taking an interest in their life. And then off of that, focusing in on 1, 2, 3 people that have common interests, that have common goals, that are, if you're a follower of Jesus, that they would be a follower of Jesus too, and you get to know them a bit. Honestly, it's the same for introverts and extroverts. It's just harder for introverts. Making friendships is all about taking an interest in someone else's life. This is going to sound stupid, but as I graduated college and first got into being a youth pastor, I would actually write out a bunch of questions to ask teenagers. All right, so what do I want to know? I want to know about their family. I want to know about how school is. I want to know what their interests are and all those things. And honestly, I actually met with a youth pastor yesterday, and I was asking him a bunch of questions. All right, what are some more questions that I should be asking? And it sounds very corny to where it's wait, you want to genuinely get to know me in a relationship, and you scripted out questions? That sounds kind of cold. It's something that I have to do because when I get into a situation, it just doesn't come to me. And so I have to kind of think about questions that would actually go. So one of the questions I'm going to ask my small group tonight is, what YouTube channel do you guys watch? Never would have thought of that. Couldn't even think about that. And they're all kind of great, now I know that it's not even genuine. But I'm serious. I'd like to get to know you guys a little bit more and what your interests are. And so I just have to kind of plan ahead for it. And then it's okay to actually take breaks. You don't have to be on the friend hunt for your entire life. I go back. I was talking with somebody yesterday, and I was telling them there was a spot yesterday or Monday, I went into my office and I sat for about 45 minutes in silence. My wife was, I need to get this for my wife because she's around kids screaming all the time. But I sat for about 45 minutes in silence, just praying, but then I stopped praying and just God, I'm just going to enjoy the fact that you love me. And just kind of rest, and I kind of closed my eyes. And then I spent another 45 minutes later on in the day doing that. Introverts, you're going to need that time. Honestly, extroverts, you need that time too, you just don't realize it. Alright, next one. I would take the second, because I enjoy laughing at farts, but I hate the smell of them.
Plus, I like it when they're loud.
Yeah. It's fun when they're loud. Does anybody have a good loud fart right now that they can do?
Evan! I already used mine up. You already
I remember that happened to me.
No one did.
All right, how many more we got?
2 more.
2 more.
And 3 more.
How you doing? My friend is saved if they're doing bad stuff. All right.
2 more.
The Bible shares that like a Christian, they love Jesus and they desire to love Jesus. Now that might move a bit at times, but there's a trajectory in their life to where they love Jesus. They also then love the things that Jesus loves. So when we talk about even church, like they love, even though like we're all, let's be honest, we're all kind of weird. We all got our own thing, and this is what I love about church. Like if I go to school for the most part, this group probably doesn't hang together, right? Because you have your own group that you can kind of hang together. What brings us together? Is it we all like the same things? Is it we all have the same common interests? Is it we all play sports, or we're all part of book club, or we're all No, it's none of that. Ultimately, what brings us here is Jesus. And so he takes, this group over here and this group over here, and it's a beautiful thing about how it all knits together. And so that's one of the, church attendance is not a sign of being a Christian. Loving the people of church, even though they drive you nuts, and even though you might be like, oh, I almost hate what's happening there at times. But I just love them because Jesus loves them. Those are just some of the signs. We're actually going to talk about it in 3 weeks. Just the fruit of the Spirit. Like love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness. Those things just start to grow out of you. It doesn't mean you're perfect at it, but you can just start to see there's desire for those things. If they're doing bad stuff, listen, we all do bad stuff at times. And it's okay to have a conversation saying, hey, I'm seeing some of this. Like, what do you think about it? Is this reflecting who God is? Not if you do it that God's going to reject you, but like, does this relate? Because our relationship with God is not based on what we do, but what God has done for us. And therefore, because he's done those things, we just want to live in a way that reflects what he's done for us. Reflects the life he's given. And Christians can do bad things, like real bad things. Just gonna be honest. Because like for a moment, or bitterness creeps in, or whatever, and it overtakes their mind to where they get it off of Jesus and somewhere else. And so the best way to kind of deal with that is to just start to have questions, or ask questions, and enter into conversation with them. And if you have questions off of that, you can come and talk to me, or maybe bring somebody else with you that kind of like, hey, what's going on? All right, last one. Abby, if you're going out with a guy and your friends don't like him, should you break up with him or the friend? Should you break up with him or the friend? That's the question. So your friend is saying, I don't like him, and... Alright, so break up with the friend or the guy? Oh, you say it a little louder.
How close is this friend to somebody who really cares about you, or is it somebody who somebody who's really close to you, who cares about you? How would you consider advice? About it?
And if you have good Christian friends around you, and you're getting a similar answer from each of them, most likely they're not just competing for your time. Most likely they actually care about you. But what I often see, and I'm sure all the leaders can attest to it, you'll see a distancing from the friends at that point because, well, the friends don't love you the way that this person apparently loves you, even though they might not actually be good for you. Dump the guy. Usually. Yeah, it's like 95% of the time you dump the guy. There's like that small chance that maybe the person's just being very clingy or whatever. All right, is that it?
Wow. You want one
one more?
Yes.
Yes, we do.
Yes.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Real nice.
Heck yeah.
What does he say in the one episode of The Office?
Well, that's very wrong.
I don't need to be liked. I don't have to be liked. I like to be liked. Or no, I don't like to be liked.
Like my,
I don't have to be liked. I need to be liked.
my praise.
Yeah, like my need to be praised. Michael Scott would be kind of cool to hang around with, but Michael Scott would be a terrible friend. Because who's Michael Scott concerned about in all the Office episodes?
So,
Michael Scott. So he's not really a great
yes,
friend.
until he gets Holly.
Yeah, until he gets Holly, and then all of a sudden he kind of changes. So,
No.
all right, go to your groups.
He want to be a good friend.